שבת פרק ב' משנה ב'. משנתנו היא המשך המשנה הקודמת. Our Mishnah is the continuation of the previous Mishnah. והיא מוסיפה ללמד במה מדליקים ובמה אין מדליקים. It continues to teach us in what things you light the candles, in what things you don't light the candles. With this we covered already before. אין מדליקים בשמן שריפה ביום טוב. We're not allowed to light the Shabbos candle, the Yom Tov candle. It's not the Shabbos candle, it's Yom Tov candle because it's in Yom Tov. Yeah? You're not allowed to light in Yom Tov, you're not allowed to light with oil that is truma that became pasul.
Oh,
the oil was truma that became pasul. It was designated for burning. So usually it will not be a problem. Just burn it while you light it. That's fine. You're allowed to. So over here though, they're not going to allow you. Why? Because it's a Yom Tov. What happens with the Yom Tov? בגמרא מבואר, in the Gemara it explains, שבמשנתנו בא לפרש, our Mishnah comes to teach us, שמה ששנינו במשנה הקודמת, the things that we learned in the previous Mishnah, ולא בשמן שריפה, you're not allowed to light in a shemen, in an oil that one is supposed to burn because you're afraid you're going to eat it. So you burn it because you're not allowed to eat it as a kohen. Because this shemen is being tameh, this truma has been defiled. Hainu, we're talking about Yom Tov shechal להיות בערב Shabbat. It is a holiday that happens to be on a Friday. כמו שביארנו שם, like we explained over there. ואין מדליקים בשמן שריפה ביום טוב. And there's a special designation that when it comes to this shemen שריפה, this shemen that you're only allowed to light candles with, you're not allowed to use it on Yom Tov. Why? לפי שאין שורפים קודשים ביום טוב. Because we don't burn holy things on Yom Tov. שנאמר, because it says, ולא תותירו ממנו עד בוקר. About holy sacrifices, it says, nothing should remain from it until the morning. והנותר ממנו עד בוקר, באש תשרפו. And whatever remained until the morning, you have to eliminate. So you're not going to eat it. You have to eliminate it. שלא היה כתיב צריך לומר פעם שנייה עד בוקר. The second עד בוקר wasn't necessary. והנותר ממנו עד בוקר. Once is enough. So what is the second עד בוקר come to teach you? אלא שבא כתוב ליתן לו בוקר שני לסרטוף. So which is the second בוקר? It says there's another בוקר. Not only בוקר for sacrifices, but there's another בוקר. There's another morning. What's the other morning? היינו שלא ישרוף את הנותר אלא בחול המועד. It means that you're only allowed to burn the remainder in Chol HaMoed, but you're not allowed to burn the remainder on the Yom Tov itself. מכאן שאין שורפים קודשים ביום טוב. From here, we don't burn holies on Yom Tov. And even though this is not a holy, it's not a sacrifice. Yeah, but since people treat Truma as a sacrifice, they think if you let them use Truma, right? They're going to think that it's the same. All the rules between Truma and sacrifices are the same. If I let them use Truma on Friday, they're going to learn also for sacrifices. So that's why they said we're not even going to let you use Truma for that reason. Rabbi Ishmael says, Ein madlikim be'itran. We don't light in itran. Now, what is itran? Itran is psolet hazefet. It is the bad part, it's the secondary of tar.
שרף, לא? שרף של העץ הזה.
It's the secondary part of the saraf though. It's the second process, which means it's the bad part. פסולת הזפת. לאחר שיוצאת הזפת מן העץ, after you have the זפת, the tar comes from the tree, נוזלת ממנה על ידי האש פסולת צלולה כשמן, והוא יתרן. After the second process, after you burn it, comes the second liquid, and that's called itran. It says, ואף על פי שהוא נמשך אחר פתילה, and even though it burns very good, we're not worried over here about the burning, because the burning is excellent. אין מדליקים בו נר Shabbat. You're still not allowed to light with it the candle of Shabbat. So it says, if it lights very good, what are you worried about? So it says, because you're worried about mipnei kvod Shabbat. Because of the honor of Shabbat. What's the problem with the honor of Shabbat? Shereach ha'itran rahu. Because it stinks. It doesn't have a good smell. ואף על פי שהוא נמשך הפתילה, מפני כבוד השבת, שריח היתרן רהו, that the smell of the itran is bad, וחוששים, so what if it's bad? What's the problem? שמא יניח את הנר ויצא, you're going to leave the candle and you're going to go to another room.
You go
from the place. והרי חובה עליו לישב לסעוד לאור הנר משום כבוד השבת. And you have an obligation to have the meal next to the candle. And over here, you're not going to have the meal next to the candle because you're worried about the smell. But חכמים מתירים, the sages allow להדליק נר שבת, to light the Shabbos candle בכל השמנים. They says we don't care about smell. The sages say you're allowed to light Shabbos candle in all kinds of oils. והיינו, בשמן סומסומים, in the oil that comes out of sumsum. In English, sesame seed. בשמן אגוזים, with oil from nuts. שמן צנונות, oil from צנון. שמן שעוצרים מזרע עצמו, it's an oil you come from radishes. בשמן דגים, oils from fishes. בשמן פקועות, in an oil of פקועות, פירותיה של גפן השדה. What's פקועות? פקועות is called the vineyard of the field, והם דומים לאבטיחים קטנים. They're like small watermelons, like gourds, like pumpkins. ומזרעיהם עושים שמן, and from their seed you make oil. ויש מפרשים דלעת מדברית. There are those who says it's like a pumpkin. ביתרן ובנפט. Also they permit the חכמים in יתרן, which is smelling bad, ובנפט, which is smelling even worse. Why? Because they're not worried about smell, the sages. They're only worried about light. In other words, the sages are worried that it might not give you enough light. That's all they're worried about. שכל אלו נמשכים אחר הפתילה והנר דולק יפה. Because all these go after the wick, and the wick is good, lights good. In other words, the only worry that the Chachamim have is that you might come to lehavir. You might come to... They don't care if you get out. If you get out of the room, they're not worried about it.
If you get out, where are you going to go?
They're not...
A dark room?
Yeah, they're not worried about that. They're not worried about...
It's not logic. That's why they're not worried.
No, it's because they don't care about Kavod Shabbat.
Care about the light.
They care about... the other ones, it looks like he cares about Kavod Shabbat. The Chachamim says, Kavod Shabbat, you didn't break Shabbat. It's not the end of the world, so you didn't honor Shabbat, you didn't eat the meal in a good place, but you didn't break Shabbat. We're only going to care about what will happen if you break Shabbat or not. The other guy says, I'm also going to worry, not if you break Shabbat, or לכבוד Shabbat. That's the difference. ואין החכמים חוששים לריח רע של יתרה, שמא יניחנו ויצא. Or even better over here, it's interesting to see what the Bartenura will say. Over here he says, the sages are not worried that you leave the room.
Right.
So maybe they are caring about Oneg Shabbat. So it's possible they do care about Oneg Shabbat. They say, it's not going to bother you for Oneg Shabbat because you're going to stay in the room.
I would, my logic would go, why the Chachamim is not worried about Oneg Shabbat? Because where are you going to go? If that's what the oil you have, next room, if you have light there, it's also that kind of a light. So wherever you're going to go, you can eat without the light.
Yeah, but you know how halacha goes. They will always give you an example that goes against you. So they will ask you, in your bedroom you have sumsumim oil, and in the kitchen you have itran oil. And the Chachamim are still not, what the Chachamim are going to say in that. So think about in that case, would the Chachamim worried or not worried?
Yeah, no, the guy would say, if I had sesame oil, I put it in the Shabbos table. But that's, of course, I have neft, that's the only thing I have.
Yeah, but you see, but when you say halacha, you have to say it all the way through.
This way. You can think like me. Yeah.
Okay, up to here. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Rabbi Tarfon says,
שמן זית.
אין מדליקים אלא בשמן זית בלבד. Rabbi Tarfon says, you're not allowed to light in any other oil besides shemen zait. Says nothing else is permitted, only shemen zait. You know what? I don't think it brings it here. I'll bring it. Rabbi Tarfon was actually in the time of Mered Bar Kochva.
Oh.
You know, it's during that time. And he was celebrated, Rabbi Tarfon was adamant that they should light all the time with oil, with olive oil, yeah, because it represents against the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. It says we still have a memory for the temple.
Oh.
Because it says, so he wanted the people specifically to remember the temple every day. So he says, guys, we should specifically light only with olive oil, especially in Israel, because you can find olive oil very easily. And that's why we're also going to remember the temple. We're going to remember that we need to do something about it. Not just going to forget, that the temple is not in our hands. So he says, Rabbi Tarfon says, we don't light only with olive oil. במדרש תנחומא מובא, in מדרש תנחומא it's brought down, עמד רבי יהודה על רגליו ואמר לו לרבי טרפון, when Rabbi Yehuda heard that Rabbi Tarfon says only olive oil, Rabbi Yehuda stood up on his leg and he says to Rabbi Tarfon, what are you, crazy? What do you mean only olive oil? So יעשה, מה יעשו אנשי מדי שאין להם אלא שמן אגוזים? It says, look, there's some Jews live in Madai, and in Madai people don't have olives. The kind of oil that's available is what kind of oil? Only from nuts. מה יעשו אנשי אלכסנדריה שאין להם אלא שמן צנונות? What are the people going to do in Egypt? They only have radishes over there. They only have oil in radishes. ומה יעשו אנשי קפוטקיה שאין להם לא זה ולא זה, and the people from Kaputkia don't have this one, don't have that one. אמר לו רבי טרפון. So Rabbi Tarfon said, הרי מצינו. But he says, what do you want me to do? חיבב הקדוש ברוך הוא שמן זית יותר מכל השמנים בנר ובהדלקה. It says that we see that God liked olive oil better than all other oils when it comes to candle and when it comes to lighting. ובתוספתא הגרסה היא, in the תוספתא it says, אמר רבי יוחנן בנורי על רגליו. It was, and I was regular Rabbi Yochanan is I think Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Over here it's Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. והוא מסיים, אין לך אלא מה שאמרו, and he adds, you don't have only what they says, כלומר, שאין אסורים בהדלקת נר שבת, אלא אותם הדברים שמנו חכמים בפירוש שאין מדליקים בהם. It says, we're not going to go like Rabbi Tarfon, only the things that the Chachamim said we're worried that they don't light good, only those things we're worried about. Other things we're not going to be worried about. ואומנם הלכה כחכמים, and the law is like the sages, שמדליקים בכל השמנים חוץ מאלו, that we light in all other candles except these ones, שנמנו במשנה הקודמת, that are mentioned in the previous Mishnah, חוץ מיתרן ומנפט, לבן ומשמן אפרסמון, except those things, יתרן, white and אפרסמון. יתרן, why? מפני שריחו רע, because it smells bad. נפט לבן, oil which is white, מפני ששלוותו קופצת ומתיזה ניצוצות, because it sparkles, ויש בה משום סכנת דלקה, and it has nothing to do with Shabbat, just dangerous to light with it on Shabbat, because because of the sparks, you might set up the house on fire. ושמן אפרסמון, and persimmon oil, why not? מפני שחוששים שמא מתוך שריחו נודף, ייטול ממנו ותחייב משום מחבר, because people used to use it as perfume. So they were afraid that somebody is going to put his finger inside and going to put is going to use the oil as perfume because it smells so good. So that they also forbid because they're afraid somebody's going to touch it during Shabbat to use it as oil. But everything else, the Chachamim permit, and it's not a problem. In other words, we don't go like Rabbi Tarfon.
No.
Okay. And it's interesting, the Chachamim permitted Itran. So why did they say over here not Itran? Because maybe even the Chachamim said, even though you're allowed to, you shouldn't, because it is a bad taste. So when they said mutar, the Chachamim says, it means you're allowed to do it. When they said, you've prohibited, it means we're going to give you lesh. So they didn't say on Itran, they didn't want to say you're not allowed to do it completely. But they probably did say, you're allowed to do it, but you shouldn't. But you shouldn't. It's not a good idea because of the smell. Or because the other one. In other words, when they said mutar, the Chachamim, they meant we're not worried about you're going to come to break Shabbos. But there's other problems. You light the house on fire, you're going to come and use the smell.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so maybe that's how you should learn it. Because otherwise, the Chachamim said yes, and then they say no. It doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.